about 70% of the world GDP is transiting through SAP systems. So SAP is embedded in each and every company out there. Every product you own you have in your hands right now probably was manufactured by a company that is using SAP. So with this being said, let me tell you something more interesting, which is why I think that everything we've heard today is very important moving forward, why at SAP we care about it, and why we need startups to achieve that goal. So this is what I'm going to talk about. You've seen that numbers many times today. I'm sure you wanted to see it one more time, so I brought it up here. 50 billion connected devices by 2020. I'm not a big person number. Personally, anything above 1 million is just big. It's a bit fuzzy. But roughly that corresponds to about 6 to 10 devices per person on Earth, right? I'm not talking about internet users, I'm talking about each and every living person on Earth. By 2020, we'll have 6 to 12 times more devices than people on Earth. So that, I think, is a huge number. And there is no way we can deal with this without some serious changes in our IT organizations. And what I think is even more important than the number itself is what that means for our infrastructure. So, we built the internet, 80s, 90s. In the 90s, it was the World Wide Web. And over the years, we really tuned that very well. I'm sure many of you have been involved in that. I was involved in building some of the stock feeds for Yahoo and the likes in Silicon Valley in the 90s. And we were able to scale that very well, right? You've got the web servers, you've got caches, you've got proxy servers, you've got firewalls. I think we've got content delivery network. Over the years, we really, really nailed this down very well, and it's scaling very, very well. But think about this. This was going from a few data centers to many, many people. I mean, Twitter and microblogging has changed the deal a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's still pretty much the same infrastructure. Now we're moving to something very, very different. Now we've got a lot of sensors, very chatty. All of them want to talk. They all have something to say, but what they say is not relevant to many people, right? But all of this has to go to our data centers. So before, when I was publishing, let's say the New York Times write an article, I put it on a web server, and then it's going to reach thousands and thousands of people. Now we've got a temperature sensor in my garden, and guess what? You don't care about it. I might care about it sometimes, but most people don't. But it still has to go through data centers, and we've got billions of them coming up. So this is going to create a lot of problems. Think about caching. How are we going to cache all this stuff? Are we going to be able to cache it? Things like security, identity, right? We're not talking about users anymore. So I think we've got a lot of challenges ahead of us. We haven't talked about that. We haven't talked about that today too much, but we're really turning the internet on its head. So this is something that I think a lot of us will have to solve and deal with moving forward. That's one thing I want to bring. And when we talk about devices, we always talk about these things. These are shiny consumer stuff, and you might wonder, what does it have to do with SAP? Well, first of all the companies building this are SAP customers. But I think what is more important is that there's a lot of less glamorous stuff happening in the background. All these other things in the industrial world are also being connected. At the top, we've got these are air compressors from a company called Kaiser Compressors in Germany. And actually, they did something very, very, very interesting. They didn't just connect their air compressors to the internet. What they did is that they actually changed their complete business models. They went from selling compressors. So we go and buy these huge compressors, they're very expensive, and now you're buying air. So you're basically buying 50 cubic meters of air a day. So they went from selling you machines or renting them to you to a service-based business model. So this is kind of the Uber of the air compressors. Something that is not very glamorous, but people are already using this to change their complete business models. And that's something very interesting. And people are putting sensors in ball bearings. Because, if you have a ball bearing on a big crane and this comes to a grinding halt, there's a lot of problems, right? People are also putting sensors in tires. And I know a lot of us have probably sensors on our cars right now, but ask yourself, are we doing much with this outside of just looking at the display? There's much more that can be done. And a lot of companies right now are trying to figure out how to do this, and they're basically asking us, SAP, to help them doing that. So basically, Internet of Things is not just the flashy consumer stuff. There's a lot of things happening in the industrial world as well. A good example of that is another one. of our customers, which is called Siemens. I'm sure all of you know the name. I'm not sure you know that Siemens is actually the #1 vendor of manufacturing equipment. So when you buy a car, your car has been built in a factory with Siemens robots, most likely. If you buy electronics, same thing. So what Siemens is doing now is that they're actually building what they call the cloud for industry that is running on an SAP platform. And each and every machine you're going to be buying from them from here on is going to be connected back to this cloud. And basically from here on, they're going to open this platform for customers and companies to build value add on top of this. Things like predictive maintenance and a lot of other things. So this is another example of how the Internet of Things is impacting the industrial world as well. When we talk about IoT, there are a lot of things, right? There's really 3 phases that I see. The first one is take your sensors, connect to them, and this is not an easy task by any means. Think about all these sensors. There's a lot of data in there. A lot of companies have already failed trying to do this. The other one is optimize the way you do business using the sensors, but the holy grail is really change your business, find new ways of generating revenue, basically reimagine your business. And this is not a sequential thing. You can do things in different order. You can even start from the top there. But this is really 3 different ways to look at it. And most of the Internet of Things use cases I've seen so far were around connecting and transforming. So going back to this tire example before, again, many of you probably have tires that are reporting back to your dashboard, telling you the pressure tire might be low. But this doesn't give us a lot of, it's not that interesting, right? Because if you're like me, you're probably waiting until it's red and then you do something about it, but it might be too late by then. And that doesn't really help the tire manufacturer. On the other end, think about it. If the tires were actually to report all the time their pressure back to a data center, you could easily see, using machine learning algorithm that we've seen earlier, for instance, that one of the tire is leaking air much faster than the others. And from that, you could receive a nice email saying, you know what, you've got a tire. It's still fine, it's not under the limit, but it's actually leaking air much faster than the others. And on top of that, we know you live in this area, and here's the nearest retailer that we know of. And by the way, they're running a 2-for-1 promotion right now. So suddenly you went from the simple sensor, just alerting somebody, to a new revenue generating opportunity. So I think this is a good example of reimagining your business using these sensors. And I think a lot of companies are not there yet. But this is how we need to help them and things like machine learning is going to be critical for that. Because obviously, you cannot afford to have one person looking at a screen, a dashboard, and trying to figure out all these things. You need machine processing in the background. So, to me, the core technical competencies that people will need to execute on an IoT strategy is, first one is just visualization, dashboard. A lot of companies still do not have that. This is #1. Next one is in-memory processing. At SAP, we've got our columnar database to do this. But basically, you cannot afford to do things in batches anymore. If you have a sensor reporting every 30 seconds, if you're on a batch every 4 hours after that, it's not going to help very much. So in-memory processing is critical. And the other one is you need infinite storage, because you're going to be generating a lot of data, and you need to be able to go back and actually apply a lot of knowledge on this. And finally, machine learning will be the next one. So you can see this aligns very well with what we've been talking about today. And this is why I think you are all in a very good spot, right? Because your skills are going to be in very, very high demand moving forward. This is what all the companies are trying to do right now. As I said, many of them already have some BI capabilities. Some of them have in-memory as well. Very few have big data and machine learning. So I think this is going to open a lot of very interesting opportunities moving forward. At SAP, we assemble a stack, and I'm not going to go through each and every box since I only have a few minutes, but basically we are assembling pretty much the stack that I talked about earlier, right? And we're trying to do this in the simplest way, even though there's a lot of boxes. It's not an easy problem. It's not an easy problem to solve. So we're assembling this in a cohesive stack, and we're also embedding these principles in our next generation ERP. For those of you who are not in ERP space, S/4HANA is a new generation of ERP. If you think about it, ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning, was designed 20, 30 years ago for people basically was designed for people. Think about warehouse management. You had somebody with a clipboard going, looking at the shelves, writing down numbers, going back to the desk and entering all this manually. So at that point, it was fine to run everything in batch. Now you've got all these sensors on each and every box in your warehouse, automatically reporting where they are, the count of items in there, and there's no people in between. So everything can be done in real time. But your ERPs that we designed 30 years ago is not going to cut it. You need something new. That applies all the principles we talked about before, in memory, real time, and embedded analytics. So this is what we're doing with S4HANA. Now, I guess the next thing that everybody wants to do is go have dinner and some drinks. So anybody knows what this is? Yeah, well, that's whiskey. I think that you're right. But the other thing that you have here is actually a sensor on this bottle. And this is a very good illustration of why at SAP we're working very closely with startups. This is actually, Weisberger is a local Israeli company. And what they did is something very interesting, in that they actually started putting sensors on all these bottles, but also the beer taps and the likes. So suddenly, using this data, breweries and soft drink companies can do analytics that they've never been able to do before. Because until then, they were just shipping kegs, right? And you don't know if you're selling a lot of kegs because you've got a promotion going on. You don't know if it's cannibalizing any other products. I mean, just selling kegs. You don't know. Now, with this, they can actually see in real time. We played an ad yesterday at 5 p.m., and you know what? We started pouring much more. Or maybe when we sell this, when we have a promotion on this during the happy hour, we're not selling as much as the other brand. So it's actually cannibalizing our other revenue streams. So this is a very, very, very niche use case of IoT, something that us at SAP would never have thought about doing it. You really need to have the deep expertise of a startup to do this and be very, very focused. And this is exactly what at SAP we're working with startups like yourself and Weisberger. And this is basically what my next message, which is, when it comes to IoT, nobody will be able to do it alone. Some companies might claim it, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to assemble something that goes all the way from a hardware to solving a very, very deep vertical problem. And nobody has this expertise. So you will need to partner like never before. And this is why at SAP, we're very focused on partnering. You've got our standard partner program like everybody else, but we also have a capital branch. So Sapphire Ventures, as well as the Hasso Planner Ventures. We're investing in new companies. But we also have the two programs. We have the Startup Focus program and the Innovation Center Network. These are really focused on startups. And basically what we do is that we work with these companies, we provide them the SAP technology they need, and we give them the exposure of the SAP network and SAP customers. Remember, 98 of the top 100 most valued brands are SAP customers. So this is a huge opportunity for the startups, but also great for us to see where innovation is going and deliver to our customers differentiated solutions. So we're very, very interested in working with startups, and this is what we'll be talking about for the rest of the day today. So with this, let me close and mention that, as I mentioned, the reason we're doing everything we're doing today is really, in my opinion, because hyperconnectivity and IoT is coming. This is what's going to drive the need for machine learning. This is why we cannot afford to process things manually. We need to do it with machines. So machine learning, big data, in-memory and visualization are going to be key skills and core competencies for all the companies moving forward. At SAP, our mission is try to bring this in a cohesive and simple stack, but we will need some help, as I mentioned. Nobody can do it alone. So especially in IoT, there is no way a single company will have the expertise all the way down from the hardware to a very specialized solution. So that was it. Just wanted to kick off the track, and hope you enjoy the rest of the session, and thank you for staying so late.